Hi, and welcome to this live reading from A Hundred Wishes by Marianne Rice, and this is presented by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Chapter 1. Gina plastered on her funniest, genuine smile as the picture-perfect couple approached her table. To say the man could have been the leader of the Avenger Squad was putting it mildly. His massive shoulders, chiseled cheekbones sprinkled with a sexy 5 o'clock shadow, and light gray eyes made him incongruous with the church craft fair scene. The dark-haired beauty on his arm looked like she was made especially for him, as perfectly beautiful as her husband, or boyfriend, or whatever they were. "Did you really make all these?" the woman asked, running her hand over the star spin stitching. "I did. Kind of a dumb question, since Gina was standing behind a 10-foot table draped in quilts. The 4-foot table next to her housed the jewelry she made as well. "Oh, you're so talented. Oh, look!" The woman tugged on her haughty superhero and pointed to the spinning pinwheel baby quilt hanging on the wall behind Gina. "Don't you think it would look perfect in the baby's room?" If the woman had a baby recently, she shed the weight pretty darn quick, and if she was still pregnant, she couldn't be more than 8 minutes along. Her flat belly and skinny jeans showed no signs of a baby within. Sure, Nat." Her husband didn't even look up from his phone. That solved Gina's lust problem. No worries about the good ones being taken. The guy didn't even give his beautiful, possibly pregnant wife the time of day. "Would you like to look at it?" No longer envious of the woman, Gina took the quilt down from the hanger and handed it to her. The woman unhooked her arm from her husband and took the quilt. "I wish I had an inkling of a creative bone in my body. This is beautiful. I love all the pastels." She ran her hand lovingly over the quilt work. Gina may not know how to sew, but at least she showed some appreciation for the 30 hours of labor it took to make it. She shrugged the chip off her shoulder and smiled, for real this time. "How old is your baby?" 10 weeks. She rubbed her belly with her free hand. I may be jumping the gun on decorating the nursery, but my husband and I just found out a few weeks ago. The next 30 weeks are going to take forever." Gina glanced at said husband, who now had his back turned to them, the phone pressed to his ear. "Congratulations." She pitied the woman and her inattentive husband. "Are you going to find out the gender?" I don't think so. We want to be surprised. That's why this quilt caught my eye. The greens, blues, and yellows are exactly what we'd been talking about for the nursery." By the looks of her husband, he hadn't been doing much talking. Or listening. "Do you think it's too soon to start buying things for the baby?" A heavy emptiness weighed in the pit of her stomach, and she quietly shook it off. Gina had no experience with babies. Brooke and Charlie could be making a grand announcement any day now. It wouldn't surprise Gina at all. They were both in marital bliss with amazing husbands. Husbands who actually paid attention to them, unlike Mr. Avenger. "If you want some time to think about it, I can always hold it for you, or make one with custom colors and patterns if there's something else you like better." The woman scanned the folded piles of quilts and hugged the pastels to her chest. "You know what? I'm going to do it. I'll take it." "Perfect." Gina folded the quilt and wrapped it in tissue before putting it in a bag. She took the woman's credit card, Natalie Cotton, according to the raised lettering, and ran it through her card scanner. "And it's official. My first baby purchase. Thank you." She held out her hand. Gina Fisher. "It's nice to meet you, Natalie. Congratulations and good luck to you, both," she added, glancing at the no longer sexy guy's back. "Can I take a card? I'd love to show your work to my parents and mother-in-law." "Absolutely." Gina handed her a card and attended to another customer as Natalie stepped aside. Gina chatted with the elderly ladies admiring her work while keeping an eye on Natalie and her loser husband. She said something to him, he nodded, then she took off while he stayed in place, still on his phone. A few minutes later, when no one was corralling around her space, she refolded the top layer of quilts. She felt his gaze on her before she saw him. Licking her lips, she lifted her gaze and frowned at the man. He grinned at her with interest. "Hi," he said, pocketing his phone and stepping over closer to the table. "Natalie's over there." She pointed toward the other end of the room. "She told me." He scanned her table but didn't seem the least bit interested in her quilts. "So, you made all these?" "Yeah, it's a craft fair. We're crafters. We make stuff." She didn't care if she came off as snarky. Married men shouldn't look at women the way he was looking at her. His gray eyes smiled with humor as he seemed to take in every detail of her face with interest. His intense stare should have made her shiver, should have given her the willies, not made her blush. "I'm Bryce." He held out his hand like they were at a bar getting to know each other. Gina pulled at the scarf around her neck, making sure it was covered as much skin as possible, and kept her hands to herself. She was sure if he saw what lay under her clothing, he'd be running for the hills. It wasn't her usual tactic to scare off men showing her scars. Heck, she'd had no need to ward off men in the 3 years since the bombing. The only men who touched her were doctors and physical therapists. This man, standing less than 6 feet from her, set off all her warning bells. What he wanted and what she wanted were nothing the same. When your life flashes before your eyes, gone are the sexual desires you once craved. The one-night stands. The meaningless relationships. And never, ever would she have considered an affair with a married man. A married man who was going to be a father. Instead of telling him off, Gina resorted to the new her, the civilian her, the sweet wannabe homemaker Gina Fisher. "Nice to meet you, Bryce. I, need to take this." She took her phone out of her back pocket of her jeans and turned her back on him, pretending to have a call. "Hey, Andrew," she said loud enough for Bryce to hear. "I miss you, too." Knowing her luck, her phone would start ringing, calling her bluff. She tucked it between her shoulder and her ear and moved away from the table to straighten the quilts on the hangers. She cast a quick glance over her shoulder and saw Bryce hadn't budged. "I love you too, honey. See you in a bit." She stuck her phone in her back pocket, thanking God it didn't ring during her fake call. "I guess that answers my next question," Bryce said with a chuckle. "It was nice meeting you." She ignored him and greeted her possible customers. What a prick. "You sure I'm not a third wheel?" Gina hopped into the back of Owen's truck and leaned over the front seat to give Charlie a kiss on the cheek. "It's a little late to ask now, isn't it?" her best friend chuckled. "Where's Olivia?" Owen's little sister lived with them, and if she wasn't in school or at a friend's house, she was hip to hip with Charlie. Charlie took on the role of mother before Olivia's birth mother had abandoned her, which was only one of the 4 million reasons why Owen loved her, as he was quite open about repeating on a regular basis. Gina was happy for her friends. Brooke and Drew had a similar fairy tale relationship. Meanwhile, Skylar was still serving, spending the little leave time she had in Angel Springs with her, Charlie, and Brooke. The 4 of them had been best friends since they enlisted in the Army almost 15 years ago. Their paths led them in different directions, but here they were, at least 3 of them, back together again, settling down in Angel Springs. Well, Charlie and Brooke were settled. Skylar would never settle. She loved her freedom, her single life, too much to play wife. Gina used to be the same until... Liv said she didn't want to go bowling with old people, so she's at a friend's house. Gina laughed. Kind of ironic, since we're going to the grand opening of a playground. "Easy there, don't let Nick hear you call it that," Owen warned. "Really?" Charlie chuckled. "You've been razzing him for months about his little kid playground." "Yeah, well, it's different when a beautiful woman insults his manhood. I, however, can get away with it." "I promise not to insult Nick's man card by calling the zone a playground." Gina crossed her heart. She'd met Owen's friend a few times this summer when he'd come out to volunteer at the summer camp she, Brooke, and Charlie ran. Nick was a nice guy, a kid at heart. The zone was needed in the sleepy town. Known mostly for its ski lodges and beautiful mountains, Angel Springs wasn't hopping during the summer. Skiers needed something to do other than ski, and on windy days, or when kids wanted a break from the mountains, families were always looking for something else to do. Nick had turned an abandoned warehouse at the edge of town into every kid's dream. There was a laser tag course, a bowling alley, glow-in-the-dark mini-golf, arcade games, a restaurant, and a bar. Tonight's grand opening was for friends and family only. As his lifting partner, Nick had invited Owen, who invited their group of friends as well. It had been a long time since Gina hung out with anyone outside her circle. Staying in Angel Springs after the summer camp closed was a big move for her, not only geographically, but mentally as well. She didn't need her doctors and therapists 24/7 like when she had been first medically discharged. "Owen said there'll be a lot of guys from the gym there." Charlie turned around in the front seat. "Pick one out and we'll plan a double date soon." "Pick one out?" Gina laughed. "You make it sound like we're going grocery shopping in the produce section." "More like the meat market. Owen works out with some schmexy men." "Hey now," Owen scoffed. "I don't need my beautiful bride eyeing other men, and I sure as hell don't want other men eyeing you." I'm teasing. Charlie leaned over and kissed her husband on the cheek. The PDA between her friends didn't bother Gina. It wasn't jealousy she felt. It was pride that her friends had found happiness, but deep down inside she wondered if she'd ever find someone who loved her the way Owen loved Charlie and Drew loved Brooke. The men looked at their wives like they hung the moon and were the sexiest women on the planet. Gina rubbed her left shoulder. The pain was minor compared to how it used to be. Her scars and puckered skin would keep her off any and every beauty pageant roster. Not that she'd been a contender before her body had been marred. I'm not looking for a guy tonight, Charlie. I do, however, plan on kicking your ass in bowling. Game on. $10? Can I get in on this wager? Owen looked back at her through the rearview mirror. Depends, Charlie. Is he any good? Honestly, I don't know. We've only gone candlepin bowling. We've never used the big balls. Owen opened his mouth and Charlie covered it with her hand. I swear, if you tell another big ball joke, they'll be staying blue for a long, long time. TMI. Gina covered her ears. They laughed and made wagers on everything from laser tag to skee ball. When they got to the zone, Owen draped one arm over his wife's shoulder and the other over Gina's. All right, ladies, let's have some fun, he said, leading them inside. It wasn't what she'd expected. Instead of the little kid party zone vibe, it was more upscale. There were 7 bowling lanes to the right, a huge Cheers-inspired bar in the middle with tall pub-style tables surrounding it. On the other side of the building appeared to house the arcade games and all the activities where you could earn tickets to claim prizes. A set of wide stairs led to a catwalk with bright signs indicating the laser tag room and mini golf area. This place is huge, and it was humming with excitement. Nick came out from behind the bar and clapped Owen on the back. Thanks for coming and for bringing the ladies. He wiggled his eyebrows at Gina and Charlie. Haven't been by in a few months. I'm impressed. You remember Gina? How could I forget? He picked up her free hand and kissed her knuckles. Laying it on pretty thick, Nick? Owen hugged Gina protectively against his chest with big brotherly love. You already have one. I figured you'd share. Charlie lightly punched Nick's arm. We are not even going to dignify that comment with a remark. For being a male chauvinist as, you better hook us up with Elaine. My apologies, my lady. Nick winked at Gina. Come follow me while I set you up. She knew he was only playing and wasn't the least bit offended, and by the laughing banter between the friends, she figured they were teasing as well. Brooke and Drew were already at the lane and had their bowling balls picked out. It's about time you showed up. I already got us drinks. Brooke handed Gina and Charlie each a can of spiked seltzer. Hugs were shared all around, and then they started their game. An hour later, Gina found herself doing a victory dance as the leader of the board in the 10th round. Owen bowled first, knocked down 8 pins. You got this, Fish. All you need is 6 pins to win the game. Charlie rubbed her hands together. I see how it works. Best friends before husband? Guess who won't be getting any? My ears! Gina covered them again, an ongoing joke she did with her married friends. I was going to say ice cream? Seriously, Fish, get your mind out of the gutter. Owen tapped her lightly on the head. All you ladies ever think about is sex. A new deep rumble of laughter came from behind the bench where her friends sat. Gina craned her neck and gasped. What was he doing here? She scanned the room looking for his wife. His pregnant wife. He probably left her at home while he went out on the prowl. Sneering her nose in disgust, she turned back around, picked up her bright orange bowling ball, and pretended it was his head. Holding the ball in her hands, she focused on the 10 pins at the far end of the lane, took 2 steps, then sent the ball rolling with all her strength. Strike! Go, girlfriend! Brooke and Charlie screamed from behind her. With a smug smile, she spun on her heels and lifted her brow in a satisfied smirk. It was meant for Owen, but the towering man had come into her view. No longer was he behind the bench, but he'd taken a spot next to Owen. Damn, you're good, Gina. I'll give you that. Owen pulled out his wallet and took out some cash. She avoided any further eye contact with Bryce and eyed the $10 bill. I'm not done yet. I still get 2 more throws. Please, don't rub it in. You already won. Bryce snorted, and her gaze involuntarily glanced in his direction. He sipped from his beer, his smoldering gaze lasering in on her over the top of his beer bottle. His dark gray Henley stretched across his wide shoulders and fit him perfectly, hugging his torso and narrow waist. Well-worn jeans that had seen better days were molded to his strong thighs she should not be looking at. Bryce, have you met Gina? Owen asked. Briefly. It's nice to see you again. Bryce stepped forward and held out his hand. It was either take it or make a scene. If she was sure his wife wasn't around, she'd call him on his inappropriate flirting. The last thing she wanted to do was make the nice woman feel uncomfortable. Clenching her teeth, Gina took his hand in hers and gave it a solid military shake. His hands were big and strong and calloused. Working man's hands. They shouldn't be sending tingles up her arm. Hello again. She tried to pull away, but he didn't release his grip. The man-ho had the audacity to stroke his thumb across the back of her knuckles. She shivered. She couldn't help it. It was a knee-jerk reaction. In any second now, her knee was going to hit the jerk in the balls. Tugging harder, she freed her hand and turned her back on him. Her friends, completely unaware of the electricity and tension in the air, continued to taunt Owen for losing the bet. She picked up her orange ball, focused on the pins, and threw. Only 4 pins went down, but it didn't matter. She'd won the game anyway. End it with a spare fish, Brooke hollered. Zeroing in on the pins, imagining they were little bobbleheads of cheating husbands, she tossed the ball, knocking them all down. She turned around with a satisfied smile on her lips. That was incredibly sexy, Bryce said in front of everyone. Gina snorted and rolled her eyes in disgust. I could use another drink. She snagged the money Owen and Charlie had set on the table. Next round's on me. Come on, girls. Thankfully, Brooke and Charlie followed her to the bar. Bryce is so totally into you. Brooke took a seat on a stool and Gina sat next to her. I'd say he pretty much stripped you naked with his eyes. Charlie sat on the other side of her. Well, he's a pig. Bryce? Brooke picked up her drink and took a sip. He was always professional when I worked with him. This is the first time I've seen him relaxed. Worked with him, like at the summer camp? They'd opened the camp 2 summers ago, and a slew of volunteers had come in and out, but never had she seen Bryce. She would have remembered a man like him. He was the arson inspector, remember? Charlie said. She was still in Portland when it happened. Brooke snaked an arm around Gina's shoulder. When Brooke had first bought the rundown camp, Michael Wesley had looted, sabotaged, and even set it on fire while Brooke was trying to resurrect it. Wesley was still behind bars, but they worried about him hurting them or the camp when he was released. Gina wasn't around for any of this, still healing from her wounds in Portland. Brooke had kept her in the loop, but didn't get involved in the legal matters. Bryce was quick and efficient, keeping us in the loop. He's even done some fire safety training for the kids at my school. Brooke worked as a gym teacher in a low-income community when the summer camp was closed. She'd used her connections to help run the camp, and of course the millions her deadbeat rock star father had left her. Just because he's good at his job doesn't make him a nice person. Geez, why so hell-bent against the guy? You can't deny the hotness factor. When was the last time you went out on a date, Gina? Charlie asked. Her last date? She was still in the service before the scars, before the bomb. What can I get for you? The bartender asked over Gina's head. A pitcher of your local brew, please. Gina stiffened as Bryce's deep voice floated past her ear. I'm going to set us up with another game. You said you've got this round, right, Fish? Charlie shot up and gave Brooke an obvious head toss. I'll help. Thanks for the drink. Brooke grinned and Gina glared back at her. I hate you, she mouthed to her friends. Bryce sat in Charlie's vacated stool. His thigh bumped up against hers and she caught his scent. A mixture of cedarwood, musk, and apple. Refreshing but manly. Too manly. Somehow we got off on the wrong foot. I don't think we were ever on any feet. Gina didn't care how foolish she sounded. She was not going to succumb to the man's charms just because he was sexy and smelled like heaven. He was married. To a pregnant wife. He chuckled and she clenched her thighs, hating herself for her involuntary reaction. Yesterday you gave me the impression there was an Andrew. So he heard her pretend phone conversation. Good. Lifting a shoulder, she picked up her beverage and took a sip. My sources tell me there is no Andrew. As soon as she sat her drink down, she picked it up again, this time taking a bigger swig. I don't see what any business it is of yours. I apologize if I've done something to offend you. It was never my intent. You're a beautiful woman, and I hope to get to know you. I see the attraction isn't mutual. Again, I apologize for setting you off. You're a disgusting pig. She slammed her drink down and spun on her stool, their knees knocked against each other. This time she didn't have tingles of lust when their bodies touched. She truly hated the man. I'm sorry? Bryce actually had the audacity to seem surprised by her lashing. Where's Natalie? Natalie? Yes, Natalie. Or have you forgotten about her yesterday? She bought a baby quilt for me yesterday, and you couldn't care less about it? I don't see what that has to do with anything. And there lies the problem. Natalie is the problem? Unbelievable. I hope your wife and child smarten up to your asshole debauchery before it's too late. Go to hell, Bryce. She picked up her drink and stormed off, not caring one iota if half the guys at the bar had heard her tell off the married man. She hoped word got back to his wife that she had a solid support system. Men were assholes.